Imagine this. Austria was in the Italy knife fight with France and Spain, and their natural rival was Venice, this bastion of Republican virtue, freedom of expression, and human happiness the emperor couldn't tolerate. And it looked like we were headed for a massive battle until a century-old deal between Austria and France kicked in, and a combined French army marched and deleted the entire Venetian field army on the emperor's behalf. The Austrians marched on Venice itself and remembered Venice is an island. And that is Europa Universalis, The Price of Power, the board game adaptation of Europa Universalis, the video game, which is an adaptation of the board game Europa Universalis. This copy was sent to us by Aegir Games, the developer of this game, but we're not sponsored. This video is not sponsored by them, and even if it was, we do not compromise scoring here at Shelfside. This is a 4X grand strategy game where you pick a European, North African, or Middle East nation, and you try to accumulate as much prestige as possible. Unlike EU4, this is a competitive game. You don't win by just blobbing, although it does help. You win by scoring these changing milestones and from personalized mission cards. Whoever has the most prestige at the end of a scenario wins. I played this game 7 times at these player counts here, and I've got about 1,000 hours of the video games. When I say that this board game feels different from the video games, I mean it. A scenario of Price of Power runs from anywhere between 4 rounds to 16 rounds, and each chunk of 4 roughly corresponds to 100 years of history. So with new players, 1 round takes about 90 minutes, and if you get really experienced, it's probably going to be more like 45. So yes, this game can be a 5-hour evening, or it's something you leave set up on the table and you leave it for tomorrow or the weekend after. The grand campaign is 16 rounds at 6 players. So if your group thinks, oh, we don't play Twilight Imperium anymore, we only play the heaviest of games, this game will challenge that claim. If this game featured a full how to play, it would probably be an extra 45 minutes at a minimum, but I'll give you the abridged version. And for the rest of this review, I'm going to refer to this board game as The Price of Power, and the video games as EU4 or EU5, etc. How to play! So on the map, you have all these little multicolored shields, which represent provinces. And you'll put these wonderful little wooden chips that represent your towns on provinces to represent that you own them. So all the shields across the map that don't have one of these wooden pieces on them are owned by non-player realms, and you'll bite away at them as you play through the game. On your turn, you have a number of monarch power based on the skill of your monarch and your advisor cabinet. The starting English king, Henry VI, is terrible. So he's a 1/1/1, so you only get 1 cube of each type when a round starts. Absolutely worthless. Monarch power is spent to take actions, which include playing cards from your hand. There are 3 broad categories of action, including administration, which usually involves developing your realm, including growing your towns or changing region religion. Diplomacy, which is about spending these little wooden cube tokens and you spread them around the board. You form alliances and royal marriages, and setting up spy networks all across the globe to cause mischief for your opponents. Lastly, military actions are all about violence. You'll declare wars, build armies. So you'll go around and you'll fight battles, all the usual stuff you'd expect with military. And when you fight a battle, you roll these multicolored dice in order to smash your enemies. You also need military power to put down rebellions, and in this game, rebellions are ever present. The last major action are the events. So I mentioned that this game is played over a number of rounds, and on each round, a player will pick one of these event cards. These could be generic, like you cause a revolt, or you spread a plague, or perhaps your nobles are demanding privileges again. Those damn nobles. Or they could be nation-specific. England will have to contend with the War of the Roses, or France will have to deal with the Huguenots. So the fun part of these events is that other players can pick your events if you don't pick it on your turn. So they could pick the ahistorical choice, and you might have some serious problems as a result. There's so many more smaller rules I haven't mentioned, like the HRE, being a Catholic versus a Protestant, colonialization, and all these distant realm sections, trade, and researching new ideas. Basically, this game has a rule for almost every mechanic that's in EU4. Pros. So starting with the map, it looks beautiful. The art in this game is wonderful. The rulebook for this game is great. I see a lot of people online complaining about this rulebook and that they don't really like it that much, but I think it's pretty good. It's got tons of examples. It's got lots of pictures. Look at all these. Look at these pictures. And it even has an index. Thank the maker. So it's pretty easy to find obscure rules. The pieces for the towns are all these nice wooden chips, and the wooden meeple that represents the soldier is really very good. We do have the deluxe version of this game. So if you have the standard version of this game, those pieces are cardboard. Everyone's got these multi-layered player boards, so it makes it pretty easy to hold your components without being susceptible to an errant bump sending all your pieces scattered. Now, of course, the board is not safe from that, but this is the pros. The graphic design on these cards makes them very easy to read, and granted, there is a lot of symbology in this game. But once you do memorize the symbology of this game, the cards are very easy to read, and it's also easy to figure out what any new event card might do, even if you've never seen it before. This is the player aid, and it's great that the player aid has all these event symbols on it, so you never have to look up what these symbols mean during play. Furthermore, it's a great use of action cards to make them dual purpose. Either they have the action on top, or you're looking at the bottom and you're just thinking about the general or the advisor that the card has. And when you stuff them under your player board, you never get confused because the top part is completely obscured. Gameplay pros. So the biggest thing that this game nails is that you never have enough of what you want. So you're constantly choosing between building or scheming, fighting, or whatever else. And this is because the most meaningful actions are paid with monarch power, which is being split between these three categories. There are a few methods to increase your monarch power in a given round, whether that's changing your national focus to move cubes into one zone, or by picking an event card that maybe gives you monarch power. But by and large, when a round starts, you're going to be committing a very limited budget across everything that you want to do in a given turn. In every game I played, I constantly felt the push and pull of this mechanic. Do I spend military power to expand into Burgundy? Can I hold back enough to avoid getting shredded by my fellow players? What about the damn Dutch? What are they planning? Furthermore, these monarch power pools are public information. Your opponents can infer whether you are actually bluffing or serious about going to war, because your resource posture actually reveals it. And unlike EU4, the number of these things, being monarch power, ducats, or your manpower, is much, much smaller. Every cube is a meaningful trade-off. So I said earlier that every player has to pick one of these event cards, and these event cards all inject a wonderful amount of historical flavor into the game. And they also give faraway players a mode of interacting with each other, but they do more than just that. Price of Power demands that everyone participate in the messy and chaotic world that is Europe. You can't hide in the corner and build your perfect little engine, because rebels will suddenly spawn and they'll disrupt your plans. So every round is punctuated by the same thought. Do I take the event that helps me, or do I deny them an event that they want? I have good relations with that country. Do I really want to spread a plague in their capital city? Well, if I pick it, I'm going to get 8 ducats. That's a lot of money, and so on and so forth. This event selection step is public information, so interaction begins straight from the get-go. players can look at the events and immediately start making deals with their fellow players, either to leave certain events alone or have someone pick certain ones. Even the act of taking an event card is interactive because you then put money on the other unchosen events, making them that much more enticing. Lastly, there is a bit of randomness in these events because the final unpicked card will get auto-resolved. And sometimes those auto-resolutions are predictable. Other times, your most lucrative trade route will now be randomly infested with pirates. So like in other 4X games, you can't pass on a round until you've picked an event card. That's true in Price of Power too. But in Price of Power, passing is actually kind of a weapon because you can't declare wars on someone who has passed, including their allies. So this creates basically two kind of good play situations. A, I pass early because I want to go first next round. I want the bonus money from passing first, and I can't afford to be at war this round. Or B, I pass late because I have to squeeze the maximum efficacy out of every action I take this round, with the consequence of I might get struck by my opponent next round who has an untouched army, and I overextended. Every nation has its own stack of mission cards. So in a given round, you will pick 2 of these mission cards, and those are the only 2 missions that you can fulfill this round. Completing one of these missions will give you prestige, and it'll give you some mechanical benefit as well. And once you complete a mission, that will unlock more missions that you can choose from. And so the deck will continue to push you through history. There are mixed opinions about mission trees in EU4, but I want to talk about the positives of these mission cards in Price of Power. After playing a lot of this game and talking with friends who have also played a lot of the video game, these cards make the nation you're playing feel more historical and give you some more asymmetrical flavor because they're basically demanding that you mimic the actions that that country took in history. And thus they inject a bit of history into the game. But rather than railroading, I would say they make the game more accessible because they give newcomers a direction for what they should be doing in a game that has a ton of systems. And the game is won by whoever has the most prestige. And these are one of the primary methods of getting prestige. So this isn't like some optional DLC, or it's not like a patch they added in 7 years later. This is a core pillar of the scoring engine of the game. And then we have these milestones. These are public objectives, and they're first come, first served. So you get 5 prestige if you're the first person, 3 prestige if you're second, and 1 prestige if you're third. Even if you're playing as England, you're still competing with the Ottoman Empire for these milestones. Everyone at the table is your enemy because you're all racing to be the first person to get these. And because the rewards are not evenly distributed. So you can't spend 100% of your time turtling and pushing the development button because then you're going to miss out on the prestige that you get from scoring milestones. And furthermore, these milestones give you monarch power. Remember how hard I said it was to get monarch power? Going really hard to fulfill one of these objectives does not cripple your action economy engine. Even if you're the 4th or later person to fulfill a milestone, you still get the reward at the bottom. Even when you're losing in Price of Power, it's still fun. Now, why would it be fun to play if you can't win? Well, because you're still participating in the event cards. These events will still happen to you, and you can still play cards that affect other people. You're still in the milestone races with everyone else, and you still have diplomatic agency. You still have your alliances, you still have your royal marriages, you still have your money that you can give to other people, and these are hugely important factors. And final scoring can have some pretty huge swings in this game. A big nation that gets hobbled by lots and lots of unrest and rebellions will still score a lot of points because you just get prestige equal to your base tax when the game ends. But a small nation will get more prestige out of maxing out their stability than they would have if they got first place in a milestone. So this is all to say that the game gives you a lot of hooks to keep you latched on to the state of the game, even if you're behind on scoring. So I was praising the rulebook earlier, but it's not flawless. There are some terms that I would consider very important, like truce, that are not in the index here at the back. And furthermore, the game doesn't have a glossary, which would be really nice considering the number of terms and exceptions that exist in the rules. But really, the big problem is the player aid is just not good enough. So the thing that every single player has asked me when playing this game is, oh, how do I do that? Because the player aid doesn't actually explain any of these actions in enough detail to give you any idea of what they actually do. With the exception of the declare war action, which gets basically the whole back player aid just to itself, which is good, great to have. Like, when I want to appoint an advisor, what do I pay? Everything's got a little hand symbol. What does that mean? And we have all this space which is devoted to the secondary event symbols, which is really nice if you're the one who's resolving the event, but it's unfortunately not very useful because a lot of events have a different form of resolution than what is printed here on the player aid. And that will happen every single round, because every single round there will be one event card that gets unpicked, and that unpicked resolves via the auto resolution rules. Which means you're gonna have to grab the rulebook and you're gonna have to find the secondary event page anyway. So other component woes include the tremendous number of cardboard pieces. And I mean, there's a lot. Ill health tokens, interest tokens, the crusade token, the excommunication token, +1 manpower tokens, the expanded trade node token, dynamic NPR tokens, the dynamic NPR capital tokens. And those are just the generic ones. There's also player-specific tokens. You've got cardboard vassal tokens, alliances, royal marriages, ruler as a general, claims, and a collection of these tiny little tag chits. So there's a lot of information that can be tracked in some very tiny spaces on the board. Germany is really bad about this. We had a game once where the Austrian player may or may not have misplaced their alliance token, and unfortunately that really mattered where the alliance token was on. And this all contributes to a global problem in Price of Power. A lot of information in this game is hard to find. It's hard to find where certain rules are. It's hard to find where the key provinces on the trade cards are. When you want to trade in this game, you draw one of these trade cards and you're looking for the provinces listed on one of the 3 sections of the card. But these trade cards don't give you any info as to where these places are. So, like, okay, sure, I'm trading from the English Channel, but what are the 4 provinces that are relevant on this card next to the English Channel? Well, it could be any. I mean, there's a lot. And when you want to trade, you gotta squint at this mess of cardboard to try to find the names of the provinces, because, you know, it matters if you own them or not. That'll get you more money on the trade. And the insert for players is not perfect. It's got this tiny section, which is supposed to be used for mission cards, but all too often the tiny cardboard pieces go in here, which means gotta use a pen or something to fish them out. The insert in the box for the cards either does not have deep enough wells to fit the decks of cards within them, or the dividers between the wells are too short. So regardless, your box always is gonna kind of end up looking like this, because you either mush all the card stacks together to get them to fit, or they're gonna be sliding around inside the box when you're moving it. Oh, and don't even consider taking this thing out of the box because it's super flimsy. If I sleeved all the cards in this game, there's no way I could get it to fit in that section of the box. So you tie all this together with a rule set that has a healthy number of exceptions and special conditions, and you've got a game that is hard to play. So our suggestions to make the game easier to play would be print a bigger player aid, or maybe just a bigger rules reference sheet. It would be wonderful to have a grayed out or maybe faded version of the map on these trade cards, and just wherever the key provinces are on that map, just have those sections lit up. Our third suggestion, if you can, as a consumer, is to get the deluxe version of this game instead of the standard version. It's not an option for most people, but if you have the opportunity, having the wooden pieces really does add a lot to this game. And either the board needs specific locations, specific inserts for certain types of tokens, or the total number of token types just has to go down. It would also be nice if this neutral token insert had more divisions in it. This section is pretty good with the coins and the rebel meeples, but this section, you can probably see it kind of just is like a huge mess because there's so many different religious tokens and the DNPR tokens. In practice, I just end up like fishing around through these to find the one that I'm looking for. So I mentioned that rebels are ever present, which means at the end of every round, you will be rolling rebel dice equal to the amount of unrest that you have in your country. This could be a lot. This could be 10, 15 times that you have to roll these individual dice. Not such a big deal on its own, but the problem is, in this game, you only get 3 rebel dice, and if you're playing with 6 players and everyone's got 10 unrest, then that means every single person has to wait because you need to roll your rebel dice, and then you have to look at them and go, oh, okay, I need to resolve all these. And then you pick them up again, and you roll for the next area. And then you resolve them again, and you go to the next area. And everyone is sitting around the table waiting for you to do that, and you have to do that every single round, sometimes multiple times per rounds, because there are event cards that trigger everyone rolling rebel dice. And this just eats up so much time because everyone's sitting there waiting for you to hand over the rebel dice for them to roll. Hello. This is Alexander, the editor. I emailed one of the designers at Aegir Games some of our cons, and they got back to us. So I thought it would be worthwhile to mention all of their responses on our cons. So regarding the player aids, they said they have errated the version that we are using, and they've also included an extended play example in all the sets. They said using the playmat adds 34% more space, which presumably means the provinces have more space to put stuff in them, which is great. They list some resources for making trade easier to manage, but to quote them, it is a matter of getting used to it. That has not changed. They also mention in their new campaign, most of the storage problems have been fixed in various ways, which is a little vague, but if they say it's been fixed, then that's great. Anyway, yep, that's it. Just wanted to make the audience aware. So let's get to the point that I imagine everyone watching has been thinking about. Why would I play this game, Price of Power, over the video games, EU4? Well, because this is better. Well, because this is a different game. Price of Power is not a sandbox like EU4. It has scoring tracks and numerous scoring systems. It ultimately has only one winner. And unlike EU4, many of the systems in Price of Power are much more abstracted, if you can even believe that. Monarch power is reduced to a very small number of cubes rather than hitting 4 digits, and the events that you pick are not random. A scenario will give you very specific events, and those events will always happen during certain timing windows. It's not a game about blobbing. In Price of Power, sure, the nearby realms will be easy pickings, and that'll get you more base tax, but you'll quickly butt heads with your other players, and you'll be locked in conflict. Whether that conflict is over trade or colonial holdings, just land in Europe, or it's an influence battle, and thus Price of Power stands apart from EU4 because it's a zero-sum game. There's one winner, and everyone else is a loser. Price of Power is also not a perfect simulation either. You don't have pops like you do in EU5, and an individual province is roughly equal to any other individual province because they don't have defined resources. They just maybe have a trade good associated with them. It doesn't matter if you build a colony in North America or you build it in India because they're going to function in exactly the same way as a province in Denmark. Well, then who is this game for, then? I would say this game would appeal to you if you liked other Paradox games a lot. Price of Power cares about the players, how they exist on the map, and the stories that unfold between those players. It wants you to walk away from a game session thinking, wow, that was so cool when that happened. Or, wow, I can't believe that guy did those war crimes to the Incan Empire. But the game's not a sandbox. The missions are fixed. The events that a nation has in a specific scenario are fixed. And while they may appear in a slightly random order, they will always happen. And the random milestone public objectives are actually pretty consistent between plays because there's only 4 of each type. So after you play the game a few times, you'll start to be really familiar with all of them. All that to say, it's a structured grand strategy game. It's got a heavy emphasis on negotiation, brinksmanship, and diplomacy, but you can also focus on playing a more solitaire game of building up your little overseas empire. And it's also a game with a healthy amount of randomness. You roll dice to determine who wins in battles. If you fight a battle against a non-player realm, they might randomly have a really good general. So I look at this game like it's bridging a gap between people who like EU4, EU5, and the more competitive strategists. You know, the people who look at the achievement list of EU4 and they pick one and think, oh yeah, I figured out what my next run is going to be. I will tell you that this game is probably not for you if you want a more chill, empire building, fun little sandbox, kind of do whatever engine building game, because your opponents will mess you up. But it's also not anything remotely close to a simple game, so you have to have a group of people who are willing to learn the rules with you. And it is going to take many hours to complete even the shortest of scenarios. Although that said, unlike the video games, you actually can complete a game of Europa Universalis in one sitting, which is quite an achievement on its own. So succinctly, if you want the drama of a grand strategy game with the teeth of a competitive board game, and you have a dedicated group of players who are willing to go on this journey with you, this might be your perfect game. So, after critically evaluating the aforementioned pros and cons with the caveat that we are not perfectly objective in our critique, we're going to give Europa Universalis The Price of Power an 8 out of 10. It is great, and it stands shoulder to shoulder with the other Paradox games as its own grand strategy game. And we would also like to give Price of Power Shelfside certified for doing something really special and unique, which Ashton will talk more about in his personal score.
My personal score for Europa Universalis, The Price of Power, is going to be a 4 out of 10. I have a below average time with it. But I also have to give it Shelfside certified. Because there is so much I like about this game, so I want to give it the extra nod. But ultimately, it is just too long and too brain-burning for me. I mean, the premise of this game is also totally not for me. I just shudder opening this rulebook and going through the rules and all of these terms like CB token, NPR. Not only are there a ton of rules, the game also just feels very unintuitive to me. Like, can I remove a CB token to remove unrest? Nope, because while it normally operates as a claim token, CB tokens specifically don't ever reduce unrest. Oh, so then I can remove a claim token to remove unrest, right? Nope, you had to have conquered first in that region to reduce unrest. There's just so many exceptions in this game. As a reference point, I bought EU4, played a couple rounds in preparation for our 4X video, and then just dropped it because I just wasn't very interested. But yeah, I've played this game for easily over a dozen hours with 2 games, one as France in a 1H game, and one as Austria in a 2H game. And I'm still just so confused about rules. The constant jargon with HRE or NPR just feels so gamey to me too, even though those aren't particularly that confusing of concepts in a vacuum. Now, my observation in breaking down the systems of Price of Power are really that it's a bunch of interlocking minigames, like a bunch of these minigames in one, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 hour game. So here we go. They are area control minigame, fleet/trade minigame, also linked to the area control. There's a new world minigame that's also linked to the above. Then there's the event minigame that is also affecting everything. Then there's monarch points and action card management minigame to actually determine your actions. Then there's influence and region control minigame. And then there's a faction mission cards that's another minigame. This is a lot. Like, look at all this on screen. Holy cow. Price of Power makes my supposedly heavier strategy games like TI4 and particularly Civilization, those games feel like baby games. Like, there's way more things you can do in Price of Power, and with that, a lot more rules and components. In Sid Meier's Civilization, I thought 5 hours was a fairly long game, but in Price of Power, if you're playing 2 ages, 5 hours is just about halfway through the game, at least in our game. So let's start with the components. First, I really don't like the small cardboard pieces. While they're not everywhere, whenever I have to touch or look at them, they just feel really cheap. But on a bigger scale, I think the board, like as it is like this, is just such an eyesore. I know Alex keeps telling me, oh, the map looks so nice. But I just think it's an eyesore. It feels so visually cluttered with all these different types of pieces. And then there's stuff printed on the board, which makes it even more confusing. Like there's all like these little factions with their flags, and then sometimes they have 2 flags because they're vassalized. And then there's HRE borders, you have to keep track of those. And then there's even gold printed on some of the spaces. Like, what? Like in a spread out area like England, totally fine. But in something really centralized, like Central Europe, if you're playing Austria, it's just so much. It's not quite messy enough so I completely zone out, but in hour 4 or 5, it really starts weighing on me. When we play this game to 8 hours, I'm just like, I don't want to look at this anymore. I just want the game to end. But when the map ties together with all the central mechanics, yeah, I have a lot of respect for it. Even side mechanics like event cards feel like I'm playing a coin game like Cuba Libre with how much these event cards are affecting other players and the board. But at the same time, you see many event cards come out simultaneously, as opposed to just 1 or 2, in a game that is already more complex than Cuba Libre. I'm also just really uncertain about how to categorize this game in my head, how to categorize Price of Power, because on some level, it is a 4X, right? It has all the X's, technically. But on another level, it's really more of a Euro with how points are scored, with how your player board is, and how you're not really incentivized to exterminate each other. But then it's also kind of just like a sandbox with how many things you can do to alter the course of history, and also how you can just kind of play to as many ages as you want, maybe just 1 or 2 for most people. There's a lot of elements that are really interesting and entertaining enough to play with, so I'm really not that bored while playing. Like I can mess with someone else by taking their event card, or decide what mission path to go down. Or maybe it's time to mess with religion, or time to start colonizing. It definitely mirrors that feeling I got while playing Sid Meier's Civilization growing up, so the video game, as you just kind of want to do one more turn. Let's just do one more turn because so many things are opening up with the board, or how your technology is meeting your goals currently really well. But at the same time, Price of Power being this blend of 4X plus Euro plus Sandbox means it doesn't really have a satisfying endpoint for me. Like it's not really that dramatic for me for this amount of investment. After 10, 11 hours, it was like, oh, okay, we fought with slightly larger armies, we had more money, but there wasn't really a clear conclusion because the game isn't set up to have a natural climax like other 4Xs. I mean, another thing I found particularly unsatisfying are the rebels, which are thematic because, you know, your cities are rising up, your towns are rising up against you, you're an evil ruler, but in a board game, especially with just rolling 3 dice, it feels very tedious and tiresome. Maybe in a video game, this could all be automated, so it would just happen in an instance that the rebels do something instead of having to sit there and roll for everyone, and it's such a pain. The constant dice rolling on that makes it feel worse when rebels hit you, and again, in a game like this, I want to be complaining about the other player's actions against me, not about rebels popping up. Also, it probably doesn't help that when I fought the NPRs, the neutral factions around the board, that I was really unlucky. Like they'd always seem to either roll well or get a good general and then roll well. So some of my attempts at expanding in my 2 games just felt like pure unluckiness. So yeah, screw me. But I will say that the combat system in general feels good. Like I do like stacking infantry, cav, and artillery, then deciding what commander to use, and then seeing how those mix with the dice rolls. That generally feels good. I just got unlucky in our games, and that made a lot of the progression not feel as good as I thought it would be. I keep comparing Price of Power to the endpoints of Civ the board game, which is vanishingly schlop in comparison, as you're constantly unlocking tech to start eventually flying across the board, you can get nukes, and everyone's economy is just going in overdrive in very tense endgame turns. Many technology spikes were huge in that game because it's not trying to replicate any sort of timeline of historical Europe. It's just more like fantasy dumb fun. I felt Price of Power come to a real breaking point when I played Austria and also had to manage the Holy Roman Empire mechanics, and then Protestantism started sweeping across the land, and I was at war with Venetia where I kept misreading some of the locations, like not seeing that Venice was on an island, so I had to get boats. Oh gosh. These are all plays that sound very historically fun in hindsight, and I like how you have a lot of agency over these factors, but for a game night, this was just too much for me to handle. Like, oh, I have to scan this really complicated board with all the event cards again. I guess, I'll do it again. There's just so much to scan. I'm gonna say it again. Price of Power makes Civ feel like a kid's game, and Twilight Imperium feel like a toy. On like hour 8 of this though, just feel like a non-gamer. Like I just kind of want to end. I'm on my phone. Still, despite all my complaining, I do admire this game quite a bit. In fact, I wanted to score this game higher than John Company's 2nd edition, which I personally gave a 4 out of 10. Wait, so why the heck, why is this still a 4 out of 10? Well, The problem is, it's just way too long for me. Like it could have been maybe a 6, maybe, but it really just gets dragged down so hard. Price of Power has far better highs for me than John Company 2nd Edition, as you can see your army literally going across Normandy so you get to take back France. Or you're excited for that next round because you have the perfect amount of modern cubes, finally. And Price of Power has better lows or higher lows than John Company 2nd Edition because I always feel like I have more agency while playing this. There's just more levers to pull, and the sense of scale and imperial ambition is just more thematically pleasing to me. I don't want to be a pompous British corrupt businessman in John Company 2nd Edition. I said business twice, but that game makes me feel evil. In a board game day and age where there's so many supposed 4Xs that are actually 3Xs or 2X area controls, I am really glad this game exists. I got to emulate this feeling of the trials and tribulations of a line of rulers of France or Austria with all the glory and headaches. I just don't think I'm that excited to do it again. Again, Shelfside certified, and when I'm playing it, I can't help but be impressed on how it's doing all these new feeling things in the board game space. But yeah, I don't really want to play it again. Unless I play the expansion, because Alex has been telling me that the expansion fixes many of my problems with this game, so maybe I'll have to try it out.
With the caveat that I've played the game a single time for one of the smaller scenarios, my personal score for Europa Universalis is going to be an 8 out of 10. I had a really good time playing the game, but I feel like some of the parts of the immersion were a little ruined for me. But that's, again, with the caveat of only playing the game one time. I have, I guess, like 2 main pillars for the score. And the first one is, I think mechanically, the game is incredibly complex in a way that I really enjoy. I liked all the different actions that I could take. It was a huge menu of spots, and I felt like I could focus on one specific thing. And I think the mission cards actually helped with that feeling almost. Like the specific paths that you could take were both historical routes, which is really cool, and also like practically ways for you to plan your next few turns. My second pillar is the historical qualms of the game, and that's the part that's kind of bringing it down a little bit. It is this historical, like this note on like historical accuracy and sort of like player agency. I think, it's probably been talked to death by other people that this game talks about colonialism a little lightly, maybe. But I do think that there's a lot of interesting discussion to be had historically. And one of the things that I talked about with everyone here was I really wish that I had known the time period that we were going into and that I had read a little bit about it beforehand. And that event track, I think, was what brought a lot of that historical context in, both mechanically and thematically. I mean, I've never played a game where the events are chosen by players. That was really, really cool. In the process of unifying all of these different things into one game, mechanically, it doesn't feel like the game loses out too much because you can kind of abstract a lot of things away mechanically, but thematically, it feels like it loses out a lot. Because I look at the colonization process and, again, ignoring the historical implications involved in here, was just pretty empty, I guess. But also, that was in my single experience. And I also wonder what it would be like to have experienced more of the event cards where you have revolt in colonies and stuff. A consequence of this scenario, the 1444 scenario that we did, it felt like I was just really interacting with the non-player characters a lot. They just kind of felt like they were just there for me to do what I wanted. But the event cards felt like that was what was really dragging me into the historical context. I think a lot of this is cementing to me that I should give the video game a try. And I definitely want to play the board game again the next time I get a chance to.
My personal enjoyment is a 6 out of 10, an above average time. It was really funny playing a game of this right after doing that John Company video, because this is absolutely one of those games that would fall under being a historical power scaling LARP, where yeah, it's faithful to the setting, but its representation through mechanics is way more focused on the systems and logistics of making your awesomely detailed and convoluted conflict machine go brr. Regardless, that still makes for a pretty fun time even if I didn't get the full picture, because I only played one game of the intro scenario that technically wasn't played all the way through because Pranav had to leave at the last round. So we're doing that thing where everyone scrambles to make quick moves that I'm not sure we'd normally make because of the need to expedite. So this is an extremely tip of the iceberg take, some real tourist shit, because ain't no way I'm getting into the weeds unless we got a more dedicated group thing going on. But unfortunately, most sane people don't want to ever entertain getting anywhere near this heavy ass thing. Anyways, I got to play as the English and basically spent the game single-mindedly chasing down missions and only really learning the mechanics that I ended up engaging with as a result. all, which was essentially just fucking up the British Isles and getting a fat fleet out. So there was a lot of military actions being done, and the other method of diplomatically taking provinces, I couldn't tell you how that specifically worked. The main admin and diplomatic actions I did were trading and increasing stability because of a public mission, which turned out to be an expensive fool's errand that didn't pay off in our measly short scenario, only 5 hours long, barring teaching, so you know, only a handful of rounds. With that context in mind, I could easily see this game going higher for me if I were to actually get invested and really learn the ins and outs of all the mechanics, because the option permutations here seem extremely deep. And the satisfaction of really getting into the mechanics to optimize your engine is like the main point of fun to be had here. Never gonna get tired of the joy of taking in a large decision tree a sandbox offers and figuring out what paths within it do the goals the best. Like, if I had a more holistic understanding, I probably could have upped my tempo and action economy considerably by more efficiently doing land grabs earlier on, from recognizing when to convert versus when to war, getting more tax income as a result, snowballing those resources into earlier and stronger upgrades, like being able to dig harder into action card draws and know what to look for bigger tempo swings, so on and so forth. Joy of getting better at something type shit, compounded upon from how this game requires planning out tons of actions in advance, given all the crunchy steps that have to be taken before you even do something as fundamental as finally taking a province. The intersection of having to weigh so many overlapping systems can be incredibly satisfying to navigate, whether an action card should be played or used for a leader. Then from there, you gotta consider your power budget for the actions you want to take, and if that card fits into it. How much power value you'd get over time if that action card became a leader instead. Then you gotta count the upkeep costs for that. It's all just good times, planning for far out turns, possibly hours later. But alas, if all that isn't situated within the environment of a group of friends also down to clown, then it's all kind of for naught. And unfortunately, I know a lot of fresh air breathers who are grass touched, so yeah, Europa Universalis involvement at the level it would take to truly engage with its systems ain't happening. Maybe when everyone's older, some number of them go through a midlife crisis and find themselves willing to devote a ton of time into their hobbies. Hopefully enough of them go down the path of reading too much about Rome and playing war sims instead of the path of always fishing while day drinking. And in terms of some seemingly insurmountable buzzkills I got that would probably prevent this from ever reaching the status of something I super duper enjoy, there's two things: how the weight is used and the historical accuracy stringency. This game for me unfortunately falls into the category of not using the weight well and doesn't super justify being a board game, because since it's so mechanics focused, it actually makes me want to just get into the digital version where you can more quickly do so much more crunchy shit and reasonably engage in a level of brain burning that would be unreasonable to track manually on a board game. Like, I'd get so much more of that decision tree gameplay at a much faster rate and on an even deeper level if I just take the plunge and metamorphosize into one of those Paradox fans who starts posting deranged and LARPy war strategy comments on news about contemporary conflicts, where you can tell the comment was entirely informed by a gross amount of hours in Hearts of Iron 4. However, the second thing is that if the focus is so weighted towards the mechanics, so you can fundamentally have a way more gamed out, rules-bound, power-scaling circle jerk about big historical players, I then find that premise more limiting, since there's innately some level of adherence to historical facts and events. But meanwhile, I care more about scouting out the interesting and powerful plays possible, which may end up being pigeonholed into certain missions and events. Which at that point, the setting could have been something more fantastical, or allow reality to get more off the rails, like Civ, where you can make the Zulu develop WMDs. That's a lot of yapping to fundamentally say game too big, thus causing it to bounce off of friends, and it's the wrong time and place in our lives for something like this, but yeah, it is what it is.
So my personal score for Europa Universalis, The Price of Power, is going to be a 9 out of 10. I think this game is excellent, and I have a great time playing it. And I also think it is well worth your time if you liked EU4 or EU5, but you wanted more story generation. Something I really like is that these scenario booklets feature rules for coming up with your own scenarios, how to balance them, what pitfalls to avoid. So make up your own stories. There's no reason to limit yourself to playing just the big nations of Western Europe. In one of the official scenarios, they give you the option to play as the Byzantine Empire and rebuild the glory of Rome. In a scenario book I don't own, but I've seen online, you can play as the Incan Empire. I really adore how modular this game is, and how the designers want you to take this game and get really immersed within it. It's a lifestyle game. It's a game you can replay hundreds of times and still get joy out of every play. frankly, even though I've played this game for about 50 plus hours, I still feel like I'm learning something new every time I play it, because the game is just that deep. My primary criticism lies with the bots, which I don't think are very smart at all. The bots kind of check the board state for what's going on every so often, but they don't consider the overall picture. They can't understand that you need your army to attack that guy in order to stop that guy from scoring a huge amount of prestige next round. They only see that you have land next to them, so they attack you, and you probably lose because you needed to stop that guy from winning. And even if you wipe the bot's army out, it's so trivial for the bot to rebuild their whole army instantly. If you let a bot develop all of their towns on a board, it's basically like a second timer on the game. Outside of the events, because you'll have to fight their full powered army again and again and again and again, and you only have so many wooden meeples to throw at them. In my multiplayer games that included bots, nobody liked playing against them. Everyone thought the game dragged because of the inclusion of the bots, which had a very negative impact on how I perceive the game. I did play one solo game as Brandenburg. I fought against the Kalmar Union bot and the Austria bot and eventually the French bot, and I thought that was fun. It was fun enough that I would actually want to try it again, but I didn't find the bot's resolution system to be particularly sensical. Sometimes a bot would call in an ally to a war, get all the benefits of calling in an ally, and then on their next turn, they would immediately annex that ally. They would eat them, they would destroy them, but they wouldn't suffer any of the consequences from having lost their ally in the war. That said, I still enjoyed my solo game. I would do it again. I'm not an often solo board gamer, so playing a game that got me to play it solo is somewhat of an accomplishment on its own. But I don't think I would ever play with bots again if I'm playing with other humans as well. For me, the joy of the game are the stories that come out of every play. And I want to be able to share those stories with the people I'm playing the game with. So for me, the peak fun is playing with other humans. And I can't wait to play this game again with other humans. Okay. That's it.
Did you say you would make a lot of money this turn?
The Spanish flu. 500 years too early.
Yeah. Let's do this one. And let's do one more. So 1, 2, 3, because there's 6 tokens. This is the base, and that's on me. Alright.
Wow. What happens to me?
And, oh, that's right. All players must lose half of the units. No, we don't have units.